Hello everyone, this is Teivi Linardatu from Avulea Linardatu School, which is located in one of the sunniest and most cultural places in the world, Athens, Greece. Returning from my studies in the UK and following my family's legacy by becoming a mathematics educator, I came to realize that a major reform was needed in the way our students experience learning inside and outside the classroom. My goal was to arouse our students' interest, to engage them in the discovery and construction of knowledge, and to empower them by developing 21st century skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and collaboration. As a result, I decided to set up a professional development strategy for our 160 educators, which would focus on integrating different and innovative pedagogical projects into the formal curriculum using a constantly updated infrastructure of new technologies. At the same time, my eagerness to shape an open-minded culture across our teaching staff, coupled with my willingness to share with the global educational community our advancements as an institution, led me to an amazing journey, which started by joining the MI Expert and MI Fellow programs and continued all the way to participating in the Education Exchange event back in Singapore in 2018. Being part of this experience allowed me to approach the most forward-looking institutions and educators in the world. I was encouraged to schedule bilateral visits, and I was trained on Office 365 tools that I had never come across before. Therefore, I feel honored to welcome you in this training session, as I have personally realized the extraordinary impact this fruitful event can have on educators. The global lockdown amid the ongoing pandemic brought to the surface new questions about student learning and the use of technology in education. A great percentage of educators across the world try to make a transition to a hybrid remote learning model by incorporating Microsoft Teams and all its apps in many innovative ways. This gave educators a sense of accomplishment, but without a magnifying glass drilled into the progress and engagement of each student in each class, there was no guidance for making informed decisions about instructional practices. Administrators and teachers wondered whether students were or weren't committed to online lessons and if they were reaching them in an authentic way that met academic goals. No matter how hard they tried, with everyone working remotely, they were mostly left in the dark. Thus, by sheer necessity, we turned to harnessing the power of data. In truth, some of our previous efforts had fallen flat, as we were required to spend too much valuable time in collecting data and so little time remained for interpreting them. A recently launched and updated Microsoft tool called Insights provided instantly the solution to this challenge by offering educators a complete, holistic snapshot of all the pieces of the so-called remote teaching and learning puzzle. Using this tool, educators can identify the pain points of their students and develop prevention or intervention strategies. For the next couple of minutes, I will be demonstrating the Insights feature for one of my digital classes within Microsoft Teams. More particularly, we will look at how to extract qualitative information regarding digital engagement, behavior, attendance, assignments, and grades. And these data derive mostly from tracking attendance in synchronous sessions, group posts, replies and reactions, accessing course material, and progress made in assignments. All the aforementioned are illustrated in the form of dashboards that simplify multiple data into more clear, concrete, and digestible chunks of visual information. We begin by ensuring that the Insights app is added to my team. So right now, I have entered one of my digital classes within Microsoft Teams. Select the plus symbol to add a tab to this channel. I'll type Insights, select the Insights icon, and then press Save. Keep in mind that this tab is not visible and cannot be accessed by students, and no private data, such as a private chat between students, is illustrated. Clicking on the Insights tab, we enter the class overview, which identifies the latest and most updated information regarding students' wellness and progress. This overview is based on three different pillars. Digital engagement, which measures how active my students have been for a given period of time within this digital context. Spotlight cards, this center section shines some light on a number of activity details of students, such as study habits or patterns or time management. And third, assignments. Assignments depict if assignments were submitted and what grades did my students receive for those assignments. Now let's zoom in each of these three pillars. We begin with digital engagement. The left-hand side shows the total number of students that have been inactive during last week. Here, 10 of my students have been inactive. The right-hand side illustrates the total number of group posts, replies, and reactions. Therefore, this section not only underlines how many of my students have been active during last week, but also how they have interacted with each other, whether they have accessed the educator's material, or which channels are most popular to them. I can drill more into this by clicking on Track Student Activity. Now, as this session is recorded on Sunday and all data are being refreshed for the upcoming week, I'll use one of the filters to look at what happened during the previous week. My first priority is to check which students have been inactive so that I can reach out to them. I can see here that one of my students have been inactive. If I scroll down, I can easily scan which this student is. This student will be marked with a red dot, so Dimitra was inactive during last week. If I move now horizontally, and if I hover over the red marker, I can see on which date this student missed an online meeting. So on the 18th of February, this student missed a meeting. And if I click on the red marker, I can see how many minutes did she miss and on which time slot this session was. If I hover over a purple marker, I get to see what each student was engaged with in each day. The width of the purple marker is proportional to the level of digital activity of this particular student. That way I can see whether a student opened or edited a file. Were they absent for a couple of minutes from one of our online lessons? Did they access the class notebook and read our lesson plans? For example, here I can see that this particular student viewed the homework list, which is posted in a particular channel created for this reason, at 8:30 at night. I might need to discuss this further with the student. Furthermore, on this particular date, I created a channel in order to assign my students with an interdisciplinary project on rational numbers. That way I can detect whether my students viewed this channel and if they read the file that I posted regarding their responsibilities for this project. As a result, I can contact those students who haven't looked at it yet and prompt them to visit this particular channel. I can filter this list by a particular student, choosing a specific type of activity like meetings, which means that we can track attendance in online calls, which is always a very important thing to us, communication, whether they have viewed a channel, files, like whether they have viewed or edited a file, and assignments, whether they have viewed or turned in an assignment. I'll choose to monitor how this student has done with his assignments. And I can filter that by date range: today, yesterday, this week, last week, this month, last month, and I can even use custom range. Therefore, I could check how this student has progressed with his assignments from the 1st of December, let's say, till the 18th of December. And if I hover again over the purple marker and click on it, I can see that this student has viewed the assignment, on which day and what time, and I can see that on the same day he turned in the assignment, which means that he did really well. Back to overview and clicking on track student activity again, I can even sort out this list by either bringing first the most active or least active students. I usually want to look at the students who have been the least active. Therefore, I can see which students need further support. These students are again marked with a red dot. Here are some tips from conclusions coming from tracking student activity. Tip 1. During the first lockdown, we used this feature, and we came to realize that a good fraction of our students were leaving an online meeting before it was over. This led us to the conclusion that we should hold shorter meetings, as our students struggled to concentrate for that long. Therefore, data like this could help us facilitate internal reflection on how our school operates. Tip 2. I usually send introductory material to my students for each new unit before the online meeting. This saves us valuable time during group calls, as we can focus on discussing and applying what everyone has learned. Therefore, I can use the Insights feature to check whether my students have viewed this file or not. If they haven't, I can modify my lesson plan and stress some of the main points of the material which otherwise I could skip. Tip 3. Developing collaboration skills during group projects is obviously very important. I need to know how my students make substantive decisions together and whether they work interdependently or not. As we know, teams allow students to work on the same file with complete transparency. Therefore, I can check whether my students are editing a file and for how long. We move on to discover communication activity, so I click on that. And this leads to a report illustrating the total number of group posts, replies, and reactions for this week. I will once again modify the date range and look at what happened last week. So last week we had 5 posts, 9 replies, and 32 reactions in total. If I hover over a purple bar, I can see the class total activity for that particular date. So on the 17th of February, we had 23 total activity with 5 posts, 2 replies, and 16 reactions. And at the same time, next to it, I can see a list of my students and their total contribution for that week. I can even sort out by ascending to see those students who have been at all active in the chat of this particular team. I can once again filter by student, so I'll choose Andrea. And I can filter by particular channel, so I can see his activity in the general channel, and I will keep last week. Andrea's activity appears in teal, so if I hover over the teal bar, I can see that on the 17th of February, he posted a message in the general channel, and I can compare his activity to the class total of that particular date, which appears in the purple bar. Tips from discovering communication activity. Tip 1. On a daily basis, I post a message to the general chat of my team asking my students whether they could complete their homework easily for the next day and if someone needs one-to-one support. Using this dashboard, I can view later how many of my students responded to my message and dig deeper to find out what's going on with those who didn't reply at all. Tip 2. I have allowed my students to post their difficulties in the homework list chat in terms of their homework or curriculum. And I have encouraged them to take the role of a mentor by answering each other's questions. Using again this dashboard, I can check later who needed help, who offered help, and who didn't participate at all. Tip 3. If I upload an e-learning material and it doesn't receive many reactions, I will probably reconsider using this type of files and search for a more appealing tool. The goal is always to tailor the lesson plan to my students' needs. We continue with the Spotlight cards, which was the center section of the class overview. As we mentioned previously, Spotlight cards referred to study habits, patterns, and time management. Basically little tips that help me understand where each of my students stand within this digital classroom. On the left-hand side of each Spotlight card, I can see different colors, and different colors indicate different types of conclusions. For example, green spotlights indicate positive trends. For example, great news, all your students were active in February. Another such example could be good news, 6 students interacted more this week, they communicated more. Red spotlights indicate potential issues that might draw my attention in the near future. For example, this student was inactive last week. If I move forward, I can find out that this student was absent from one meeting last week. Next, these 2 students haven't turned in an assignment yet, and the due date was days ago. And last but not least, I can find out that these 3 students were often late for meetings last week. If I hover above these 3 students, I can find out which these students are in particular. For these students, as their performance could be lowered from these habits, I will try to contact them. I will send them a message in the private chat, or I will send them links from bookings in order to schedule boost calls during my open hours. Next, we have yellow spotlight cards. Yellow spotlight cards indicate a place to stop and consider some interesting facts about my students. These facts might concern me in the future. Unfortunately, right now I have no yellow spotlight cards to show you for this week, but such an example could be 2 students worked late at night during last week. This is a habit that might hurt their well-being, their progress, and their attendance during early group calls. I will need to contact them and coax them into establishing a more healthy study routine every day. For those spotlight cards that I need to dig deeper, like this one, I can click on Explore. I need to find out whether this student has viewed the assignment or not. Is there an underlying reason for this activity? Should I interact more with this student? Should I contact her parents to act by joint decision? If I click on Explore, I will be led to dashboards created either from digital engagement or assignments, and therefore I will be able to find out more details about this particular fact. If I click on thumbs up or thumbs down, I provide Microsoft with feedback in order to improve this tool and customize it further to meet educators' needs. We move on with the third part of the class overview, assignments. The left-hand side indicates the total number of missubmission deadlines. So here, for example, I have 3 students who haven't turned in their assignments yet, and the due date is passed. On the right-hand side, we can see the average grade of their assignments, with due and return dates within a given time frame. This section overall provides real-time monitoring of their progress as students try to complete their assignments. We can drill more into this by clicking on Check Assignment Status. And this leads us to a report. Here we can see all the assignments we have created as educators, their titles, and their due dates. Under Student Progress, we can see 4 different columns. Once I create an assignment, all students appear under the Assigned column. Once they view their assignment, they move from the Assigned column to the Viewed column. So for example, if I click on this tab, I can see which 9 students viewed the assignment. And this means that they have viewed it, but they haven't turned it in yet. I press Close. Once they turn in an assignment, they move from Viewed to Turned in. And once I mark and return their assignment, they moved from turned in to returned. Using this dashboard, I can monitor where each student stands with his progress in each assignment. So for example, I can see here that for this assignment, and the deadline is today, I have 6 students who are still in the assigned column. They haven't even viewed it. I will try to contact them to let them know. Whereas here I can see I have 4 students who have turned it in and I still haven't returned it. I'll need to work on that as well. The last 3 columns provide some statistics and answer questions such as, have all my students submitted on time? Were some students late? So for example, this student here, I can see was late by 4 minutes. And I can also see here that I have a student who submitted multiple times. More specifically, he tried to submit twice. He probably needed feedback in order to revise his final product. I press Close. I can even press Load More Assignments and see past assignments and look back at how things have progressed over time. I can even filter by a particular student to see how he progressed over time for his work. For this particular student, we can see that the assignment, which is due today, is already turned in and I have to return it, and the assignment, which is due on the 25th, is only viewed, so I'll probably try to prompt him to complete his work. Tips for assignments. Tip 1. If the due date is soon, I can conduct quick checks with students who are more likely to miss a deadline or students who haven't even viewed an assignment yet. I can write a message to them to remind them. Tip 2. Whenever I realize that a lot of my students regularly submit their coursework late, I ask myself whether I should review their level of workload. Maybe they need more time, or maybe I need to discuss with them how to manage their time more efficiently. Give them tips on how not to procrastinate and help them develop strategies in order to create personal timelines to help them finish by the due date. We move on to view grade distribution and trend. Here we can see how the student grades are distributed across the class for a given time period. I'll change the time period from this month to the last 90 days. These grades are presented in bars and the class average is also emphasized. On the right-hand side, we can see a list of our students and their average grade for all assignments within the given selected time frame. These grades are presented in percentages. If I hover over a purple bar, I can see how many students belong to this particular grade range. So here, from 85% to 89%, I have 8 students out of 26. And if I click on this bar, the names of these students appear in the list on the right-hand side. I can again filter these grades using assignments, particular assignments, date range, and by students. If I choose to filter this data by a student, I can see how his grade compares to the class average, and the one bar turned from purple to teal is the one that represents this particular student. I have also the option of unfolding this data using a trend line. And here, this tool is very useful when I want to compare a student's performance for all assignments to the class average. So the teal line represents the student's average grade line, and also the purple line represents the class average. Tips for grades. Tip 1. If a student encounters difficulties, I can supervise his progress over time. In the trend line illustration, we can see that this particular student is below the class average for 2 months in a row, and her grades continue dropping. I decided to arrange a call with her to isolate the problem, and we decided together to send her more scaffolded material with many solved exercises to follow through. Tip 2. I can identify students at different levels, and thus I can create individualized learning pathways that are targeted to their unique needs. I can even send them different assignments according to their level of comprehension. Thus, I can leverage mixed groups to best support student learning. Tip 3. If I have in my classroom new students, I can utilize this data to consider remediating in order to address any previous gap skills or any missing foundational knowledge. I can even arrange a small tutoring group after school hours to help them catch up. Tip 4. If my class as a whole doesn't reach the anticipated standards, I will consider readjusting the pace of the curriculum. Maybe they need extra time with new concepts, or maybe I should reset learning goals and success criteria. Tip 5. Have you thought what the grade distribution should look like for your classroom? Is it skewed with too many highs or too many lows? Here's something to think about. So this is how we rolled during remote learning. And at this point, one major question arises. What will the next day after COVID-19 look like? Well, of course, we will move back to normal school life, but the end of the pandemic will not mark the end of the Insights usage. Undisputedly, Insights has created room for growth and reflection for our students and teachers alike. We will continue relying on Insights to monitor all asynchronous activity within Microsoft Teams, as well as various group calls that will continue taking place virtually. Our educators need access to a tailored view that distills the key story and systemic trends behind the data. Hence, a learning cycle could be constructed and followed. Such a learning cycle could begin by identifying our pain points, such as evaluating our e-learning material, curriculum pace and structure, pinpointing learning difficulties, detecting students who slip out of meetings. Moving on to sharing this data with key stakeholders like parents, administration, and colleagues. To reflecting on our own teaching methods in order to formulate improved policies and adopt effective practices. This will lead us to a greater understanding of the academic, emotional, and physical needs of our students, and thus we will be able to map the missing dots, between student engagement and learning goals. So this is the end of our session. Please do not forget to redeem your code from the Microsoft Educator community. In this slide, you can find your code. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I really hope this session proved useful. Goodbye.